by the way, first of all, I should say just thank you very much for reaching out. I really appreciate it. In my own perception, I work half-time for WSET and half-time freelance, and I just don't have that many connections freelance, and obviously most of them are European. So, but on the other hand, Piedmontese wine is massively important in the States. It's a much bigger market than our UK market, for example. I know it's a bigger country, obviously, but I think the levels of understanding, etc., are also higher in the States. So I do appreciate the contact with the States. That's really what I'm trying to say.
I think that's honestly just a good spot to start if we can.
Sure.
David, thanks for coming on. I was happy to reach out to you because listeners of the show will know I actually got my start down my path learning about wine at an Italian spot. It was the first spot that I really started studying and thinking, oh, this is something interesting. I could get into this. Yeah. One, because it was so frustratingly complex. And like no matter how much I read about the grapes, even all the info I could find, sometimes you'd find blends that seemed to defy even what was listed. And so it's just like the rabbit hole goes all the way down. So I've been endlessly fascinated and frustrated by Italian wines for years. So yeah.
Join the club.
But I know, yeah. So for the listener, because we just kind of jumped in there, you are probably the perfect person to talk to when it comes to Italian wine. Do you mind just kind of giving a brief outline of how you got into this world and kind of your background in wine?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on. So as a young adult, I drank French wines, as most people in the UK do. There was almost zero understanding of Italian wines back then. And then about 20 years ago, I went on a wine trip, in fact, to southern Italy. I had wanted to go to Tuscany, but the friends I went with had just been to Tuscany. So we went to southern Italy as well instead. And I was just bowled over by this. I think actually meeting the producers, finding out about local varieties, seeing the landscape, all those things, I just thought this is absolutely amazing. So that was really the moment when I suddenly got beyond this is a nice drink to thinking this is an actual subject that you might really want to delve into. And then, so that was about 20 years ago. And then I decided, because my wife and I kept going to Italy and on holiday and being frustrated by not learning the language, we decided that we would learn the language. So we took a month, went to Italy, deep dive into a very intensive course. And that led in time to me offering classes to fellow students who were learning Italian, but about Italian wine, because they were going out in the evening. They had no idea what these great varieties were,
how to pronounce half of them.
Yeah, exactly, all that stuff. So that got me in a very, very informal way into wine education. I had zero qualifications at this point. And then when I had done that for a couple of years, I thought, well, if I'm going to go on doing this, I really ought to have a qualification. I really ought to do some formal learning. So I then started on the WSET ladder of qualifications. I was working in central London at the time as a sort of academic administrator, so world apart from wine. But it did give me the chance to go to the big school in London where the WSET has its headquarters. And I went through all the qualifications, finished up the diploma there, and then went on and did a couple more years wine study. At which point, a job came up at the WSET to work on the diploma textbooks. So just for a brief bit of background to all that, weirdly, the WSET has wonderful books for its lower level qualifications, but until 2019, never had a proper diploma textbook. And if I'm honest about it, the reason why they didn't have it was because they just thought it was just such an impossible project, just so huge. So eventually they decided to create an extra post, which was a post which I got. And so I spent 2015 to 2019 with my colleague writing the first ever full set of diploma textbooks. So that's how I got into wine education, into wine writing. I have a research and academic background, so I absolutely love that side of it, learning about things. just applying it to wine on this time rather than to all sorts of other much more abstruse things.
Are you familiar with the concept? It's the Japanese word ikigai.
No, what? Tell me about ikigai.
I'm sure once I describe it, you'll recognize it. But it's those 4 overlapping circles of like the things you're interested in, the things the world will pay you for, the things that like So like the job that you would do happily, like it sounds like you kind of found that middle circle. It's like I love wine, I love drinking wine. Yeah. I'm able to write. People like writing. It's like you just check boxes off, and that's cool.
Yeah.
I do understand the hesitancy and the difficulty of writing the diploma, and so I'm mostly CMS because I work in restaurants, and I've kind of grown up in that world. They likewise have no guidelines really for the master's. They have no guidelines for anything. They just kind of tell you these are the standards. Good luck. Find your own resources. Like when you get to that highest level, it is almost hard to put together a textbook because it is so exhaustive. Like how long, I've never seen these, but I have to assume they're probably pretty thick books.
So if I tell you that, yes, basically, is to answer your question. Yes. So D3, which is Wines of the World. So basically the diploma has a very strange structure in which it has a lot of smaller units. So like wine production, sparkling wine, fortified wine, and the business of wine. And then it has this big unit, which is half the entire qualification. And the textbook for that is 600 pages.
About what I'd think.
So it is, that's one of the things we discovered when we wrote it, that it was as challenging as we thought, because people struggled with Wines of the World, and totally understandably, and then we struggled with it. We had to write about it. There we go. Yeah. One
of my favorite wine quotes. Do you know Kelly White out of Napa?
Yeah.
So in her Wine Confident, she says, "Wine loves its contradictions." And it's like, I assume if you're being exhaustive, every single pathway, it's like, yes, but, there's also this weird XYZ, this weird, So
absolutely.
I can only imagine.
Yeah,
what got you to Piedmont?
Sorry. Yes, let's just reinforce the Italian wine point.
Sure.
So having visited the South, I then and had done these informal classes. That they were in Tuscany. So I got to know Tuscany very well. I still love Tuscany. I had the pleasure of taking a group to Tuscany, this group of Americans actually, with the Wine Scholar Guild, to Tuscany this last spring. And so when, having done this ridiculous job of being one of the main writers for the diploma, the only drawback about writing for the diploma is that you have to be fair to all the regions in the world, all the principal regions. You can't suddenly think, right, I'm going to write a long section about X because I'm interested in X. So I think I worked out that I had 10 pages about Piedmont or Piemonte in the diploma.
That's like your introduction in the book.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny because the book then ran to 400 pages. It wasn't supposed to, but hey. So then after I'd finished studying and realised I wasn't going to do anything else of that sort, and the diploma was sort of set up, I thought, well, what do I really want to do now? What I really want to do now is to write an in-depth book about one Italian region. So then, and therefore, my wife and I sat down and we discussed what this region was going to be. And the 3 obvious candidates, well, Tuscany would have been the absolutely obvious one because I knew most about it already. I love Campania and Basilicata for the great white wines of Campania and Aglianico in Campania and Basilicata. But it would have been quite niche to do that. And then obviously I love Piemonte. And so in the end, Janet said to me, she said, I think you need a new challenge. Why don't you do Piemonte? So I said, okay, fine, let's do that. So I to be honest, I did not understand what I was undertaking. Because I made exactly the same mistake that everybody makes, and that is that Piemonte is basically Barolo, Barbaresco, some Barbera,
little Cortese,
a bit of this and the other, and that's it. It turns out that is not it at all. there are 60 denominations, 60 appellations in Piemonte. There are 80 registered grape variety, about which are 60 native grape varieties. And the thing that is really, you kindly read my book, the thing that is really different about my book is that it treats every denomination with the same seriousness as people normally give only to Barolo and Barbaresco. Of course, the section in the books on Barolo and Barbaresco are the longest sections, but only marginally so. But the real point is that, it deals as much with, Colli Tortonesi and therefore Timorasso in the east, with northern Piemonte, with the sparkling wine traditions of Piemonte, which are fascinating, and I don't think anybody has ever really researched before. With local varieties in the Western Alps. It's just incredible, the riches of the Piedmontese wine scene.
The valleys of the Alps was the one where the more I read it, I was like, I know nothing about this. I know nothing about these grapes. I've never heard of these grapes, Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And it was quite obvious when I went there that no English-speaking, I do speak Italian, but no English-speaking journalist had visited there apart from Ian Dargater. Now, Ian, I'm sure, as you know, wrote The Native Wine Grapes of Italy, has spent
another big book,
30 years in Italy, knows more about Italian wine than probably anybody in the world. But they had no concept that a visiting journalist might need to do more than one visit on a day. They would just say, "Oh yeah, come along. I'll be here anytime. Whatever." No. I need to do. If I'm coming up to the Val Susa, I need to visit 3 or 4 wineries on one day. So it was wonderfully refreshing, naive, beautiful place. All those things, but completely unknown. And yeah. So I'm very pleased to have written about them.
It's both the blessing and curse of being someone who's a trailblazer. You have to you have to teach them the ways, but also you get the unfiltered view of a region.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it would be helpful because a lot of people who are listening, I'm sure, working in restaurants, just like you'd assume, they've sold maybe a Barbera, but probably a Barolo or Barbaresco if they have a decent wine list.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing they probably don't have a mental picture of kind of where also, do you prefer me to say Piedmont or Piemonte? Is there a preference?
There's no preference. I say Piemonte because, I deal with Italians all the time. I speak some Italian, etc. But I have no preference at all.
Well, you're the expert, so we'll say Piemonte. So where Piemonte sits in relation to Italy, and then within Piemonte, kind of where the major groupings are of the different regions.
Right, let's do that. So Piemonte sits basically, I would say from the outside, the people in the Veneto would disagree with me, but it seems to me that Tuscany and Piemonte are the two absolutely top-class regions in Italy. And you have to remember, I say that against the background of, I really believe in local difference and native grape varieties and all those things. And I have visited 19 out of the 20 regions of Italy. The only one I have not visited is Molise, which is sort of close to Abruzzo. And I'd love to go there one day. So I really love the entirety of Italy and the fact that everywhere is different and has different food, different grape varieties, different wine styles. Having said all that, Piemonte and Tuscany are undoubtedly the biggest hitters. If you add Amarone in, I suppose, to that, it could be you could make a similar sort of case for the Veneto. So I think it sits at the sort of top table, and certainly in terms of wine prices, wine quality, all those things, it certainly sits at the top table. The thing, but as I've said already, the thing is that people, when I say that, people are only thinking again about Barolo and Barbaresco. They are not thinking about anything else. And I can remember, just to give you an anecdote, I can remember some years ago standing next to a stand at a big consumer wine tasting in London. And a producer, I happened to be in the Piemontese section. This was before I wrote the book and everything. And the producer said to an old guy sitting next to me. He said, would you like to taste my Barbera? And the guy said, why would I want to taste Barbera? And I said to him, come on, this is an amazing grape variety. It may not be Nebbiolo, but, in effect, I will have said, the message is Piemonte is more than Nebbiolo. And that's really the message of the book.
Sorry to interrupt. I promise this will be fast. If you are listening and you like this even a little bit, please go onto whatever platform you're on, Spotify, Apple. Just give me a quick rating. It is the smallest thing in the world, one tap of the finger, and it does mean the world to me and helps us reach more people. All right, back at it.
So what are the other... in a way, it's easiest to do it by grape variety rather than region,
Sure.
If that's okay with you. So I would single out... I'm not going to talk about... I'm happy to talk about Barbera and Arnese and Dolcetto till the cows come home, but people will know about those, so I'll leave those on one side. If I was then going to say, so what are the 3 white grape varieties and the 3 red grape varieties that people should think about and learn about and go out and buy a bottle of? I would say, and this is probably the most famous of these, Timorasso from the Colli Tortonesi has made a bit of a splash, hasn't it? It's more at high end, depending on your bar or restaurant, etc. But it has been extraordinary recovery story. So although it was first mentioned in 1209, by 1980, Timorasso was down to only 3 hectares in the whole of Piemonte and therefore the whole of the world. And it wasn't 3 hectares altogether. It was 1 row here, another row there, a few plants somewhere else. It was literally on the point of extinction. When a guy called Valtamassa thought he'd have a go, was a bit dissatisfied with Cortese, which was the popular grape of the time, because everybody wanted to make Gavi, because it sold. A guy called Valtamassa decided to go around his estate and pick all the Timorasso from in the different places. That's again, they weren't planted together. They were it used to be blended, and made some wine, and then forgot about it. It's quite hilarious. He literally lost it in his cellar. Now, if you've ever been to Valtamassa's cellar, you will know this is not difficult because he's an extraordinarily eccentric genius sort of guy.
This cellar looks like my room. Yeah, I got it.
So he left this wine, and about 3 or 4 years later, he came across it and said, oh yeah, no, I remember that now. Let's open a bottle and see what it's like. And he was absolutely astonished by it, because Timorasso, a bit like Riesling, develops extraordinary tertiary, hydrocarbon, petrol, diesel, gas notes on top of fruit, etc. And so he said, right, this is really interesting. I was onto something here. So he then went and got cuttings of various plants, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, he has led the Timorasso revival, so that now we are already up to 450 hectares from 3 back in 1980. And it's been absolutely exponential in this century. And the biggest compliment of all is that Barolo and Barbaresco producers are buying land in the Colli Tortonesi, which is an hour and a half away for them, in order to plant Timorasso because they believe in it that much as a grape variety. So it started off with Roagna doing it, and followed by Vieti, Borgogno, all sorts of top Barolo and Barbaresco producers have been buying land there. What do they like about it? They like about it that it's an ageable white, which they can sell alongside their ageable reds. So I think Timorasso is an absolutely stunning grape variety. It's very unusual in that it's both very full-bodied and high acidity, and that's why it's ageable, because of its structure. And again, one last Valtamassa story. If you say to him, well, what are you aiming for when you make your wine? He'll say, oh, I'm not interested in fruit flavors. Those don't interest me at all. which is ridiculous, of course. What he means is, what I want to do is produce a wine that will age and have this extraordinary tertiary complexity, which indeed it does do. It's a beautiful wine to drink when it's young. I was invited to do a tasting at Texom after the book was published, and I showed the Vieti Timorasso there, which is young, of course. It was like the current vintage on the market, and it showed really well, so that was great. So that would be my number one pick. Have you come across Timorasso?
I haven't. I was going to say, I'm guessing that you would see it more in the coasts. Being in the center of the U.S., I'm going to assume that we see more than I would have if I had grown up in restaurants here in the 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. But, that diversification still hasn't penetrated fully.
Totally understand.
We'll see some Eberlucci di Calusos. We'll see, definitely your Alianicos. Definitely, if I'm talking Piemonte specific, definitely we'll see Gavi, Vietti's everywhere. Yeah. Produttori is here. The big names, and then some of the Dolcettos and some of the Barberas. But just, if you get to the tinier grapes, you're going to have to be drinking them in New York or California for the U.S.
No, absolutely.
I mean, it is an incredible story of 150 times growth, if I'm doing that math right, from 3 to 450.
Yeah, it's quite astonishing.
If you think about 450 is still, in terms of the wine world, not that big. Much. There's only so many bottles of these going around.
No, absolutely right. Yeah. Right, so even tinier than Timorasso is Nascetta. So Nascetta is a beautiful, gentle orange blossom and green herb flavoured wine. It's not as imposing as Timorasso, but it has subtlety and elegance and delicacy. The difficulty for Nascetta is that it's basically the variety of one village. So we're quite, as Ian Dougherty likes to say, we're quite used to, thinking about Malbec as being the grape variety in Argentina, varieties associated with the whole country. Okay. Whereas at the opposite end of the scale, Nascetta is associated with one village, Verduno. And that one village is in, Novello, not Verduno. And that one village is in the Barolo DOCG. So Novello is one of the 11 villages of Barolo. And therefore, this one, I think, although it has one big advantage and one big disadvantage commercially, the big advantage is that it can be made by Barolo producers, so that they can say, well, would you like to taste my white wine alongside, my Barolo, my Barbera, my Dolcetto, whatever. So from a marketing point of view, that's great. But from a production point of view, it's not great, because every decent bit of land that you've got that you could plant Nebbiolo on, you are going to plant Nebbiolo on it, because you are going to get 3-4 times the price for your bottle of wine at the end of the day. So it has really been squeezed by the success of Barolo over the last 20 years. So it's worth looking out for, but it's pretty rare. Yeah.
It's a story that you see in any wine region that is successful. We have the same problem with Napa and Cab, because there are plenty of regions and plenty of spots where non-Cab would do a lot better, but it's almost economically reckless to plant anything else when you can get such a high premium for it. So that's exactly right. Yeah, good. One cool thing for those of you who haven't read the book, he has a chart in there, and it's 2 different vintages. I think it's about 15 years apart, where you have the grapes grown in the past versus the present, and you can see most of them are going down. Some of the whites have gone up a little bit, but Nebbiolo is the one that really shot up in that last change.
Absolutely, yeah.
The nebulization of Piemonte.
That's right. I have a profound interest in the whites. In fact, if anybody has a subscription to Decanter Premium, I know it's an English magazine, but some people might. I wrote an article about the growing importance of white wine in Piedmont, and it is quite astonishing how it has changed over the last 20 years. And that's fundamentally because people are drinking more white wine. So if you want to... I've actually had quite well-known Barbaresco producers saying to me, my agent in X country rings me up and says, can you supply more white wine? They are actually in Barbaresco. So it's been a really interesting story alongside, you're absolutely right, alongside the rise and more rise of Nebbiolo. The other category that has done really well are the white grape varieties. So that's another whole story. Okay, on to the third of those three. And I was delighted to hear you mentioning Erbaluce di Calusa, which is one of my absolute favourite wines. And Erbaluce is just such a fantastic grape variety. Again, it is not a big, imposing white wine. It is subtle, floral, lemon, green apple, and some almond notes. And there's this amazing racy acidity. That's the real marker of Erbaluce, are these subtle aromatics, medium body, and then this incredible, brilliant acidity. And as a result, it's extremely versatile as a grape variety. It's another ancient grape variety, perhaps not quite back into the 13th century. I mean, no documentation back to the 13th century, but never mind. It's also quite difficult to grow. It's best grown on pergola, which is, so counterintuitive these days, because it means that all the work has to be done by hand. But it's better because you get better shading of the grapes, and also you can make interesting picking decisions with a pergola, so that you can shade some of the grapes and allow some of the grapes to have more sunlight, and that gives you options when you actually want to make wine later on. But as I say,
for the listener, real fast, who might not remember what pergola is, just to make sure, because wine training, I know when you are going through like certification, is one of those things. Unless you see it, it's hard to really grab onto it. Yeah.
So a pergola is like a structure which allows the grape to go up to about 6, 7, 8 feet, and then go across as though it was making a tent. So if you think about an awning, that's basically what a pergola is like. And it means that you have a layer of leaves on the top of your vine, and the fruit hangs down. It's a nightmare to work, let's be honest, because literally everything has to be done by hand and often from a ladder. But as I've already explained, it has certain advantages, and it's very interesting in some regions of Italy, like the Veneto. They're actually coming back, the pergola, because it's a better way of dealing with climate change, with warming, because again you get much better shading than in the classic Guyot thing, where
which pretty much all of Piemont's on.
Yeah, which the rest of Piedmont is on, and most American vines will be on. Because, you can work with a tractor, you can do all sorts of stuff with a tractor, with Guyot, in a way that you can't with pergola. So what are the three... you were going to say, go on.
Well, just to put my 2 cents in for Erbaluce, so usually when you see pergola in wine studies, it's in the northeast of Spain / Portugal, just in that region. That's kind of where it's like classic. And I was happy I hadn't made this connection, but Erbaluce, and again, it's been about 10 years since I've had one. It was in Santa Fe when I lived there, because they get more access to international wines. But it kind of did remind me, kind of like Piemonte's answer to like a decent quality Albarino. It's like got a little weight. It's got some aromatics, not exactly the same, but that racing acidity that really like refreshes and cleanses the palate. So it's funny that, in the wine world, they're going to have similar-ish. I think they do it in the Northeast for humidity reasons, if I remember correctly, because it allows for a lot more airflow. But
yes, absolutely right. Yeah, very good. I think that's a good comparison with Albarino. Yeah, definitely. So the other special thing about Erbaluce is, as I already mentioned, it's very versatile, and by that I mean it's made in 3 styles. So historically, it was made as a sweet wine, as a passito. That is, you pick the grapes, you dry them indoors for 2, 3, 4 months, and then you make wine, and you end up with, and then often you age it for many years. And so it was a wine for a really special occasion. So that's where it started off from. But unfortunately, people don't drink sweet wine very much any longer, and therefore, if you're going to make a living, you can't really depend on a very rare, very local grape variety, which is then made as a sweet wine. And so people began to make other styles of wine, and they discovered two things. First of all, it makes terrific, still straightforward white wine. And again, super ageable. And then it also makes the most amazing traditional method sparkling wines. So now we have all three styles: Pasito sweet, still straightforward, and traditional method sparkling. And because the aromatics are quite subtle and gentle, it's very good for taking on those sort of brioche notes or that you get from lees aging traditional method, as though you were making champagne. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I have tasted a lot of examples recently because I have just written a major report, 100-page report on northern Piemonte, and basically, which we can talk about a bit more at the end. Basically, it is the white grape of northern Piemonte. Yeah, and northern Piedmont is very traditional. There is very little Chardonnay or Sauvignon or anything of that sort in northern Piemonte. So if the wine is white, it's going to be Herbaluce, basically. So those would be my three recommendations for native white grape varieties.
That's awesome. Yeah, and, that's great to have what to search for too, especially considering that, if you say are really versed and excited about Italian wine, you probably have gone for like a Cortese. You probably have got some experience, but you're not going to have been looking necessarily for Herbaluce or even like the more niche grapes. So that's cool. That's super cool. That's right.
Well, one note about Cortese. One of the things I discovered when I went to Gavi for the book was that the very top estates keep some of their bottles back, and so you can taste them as aged bottles. So 10-year-old Gavi, that would have cost many people's. I mean, that's and the point I'd make about that is simply that we think of Gavi as a simple quaffer, and it is. It's really good at that. It's a pronounceable name, so it's going to do well in restaurants, which is really important.
Roero is only one step more, but still, yeah.
But it also, at the very top end, has got ability to age, which is partly the acidity again. It's a common characteristic of most white grape varieties in Italy. Very high acidity and therefore ageable. Yeah. So just one word about Cortese. Yeah. Shall we move on to reds?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm like, you're the master, so I'm following your lead. I have some questions to ask you, but I'm just kind of soaking it in. I hope the listeners are too.
Good. Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do one word about Barbera, because people will be able to buy Barbera, and I don't just want to recommend wines that are crazily inaccessible. So the thing about Barbera is that it's one of those grapes which got a bit too successful for its own good. And therefore there became lots of competition, and therefore there became lots of really inexpensive Barbera, which wasn't great. But that totally underestimates the quality level of Barbera. And I mean, wine writers do not earn a lot of money, and therefore I'm always on the lookout for wines that are not expensive, but really are great value. And I remember vividly when Michele Chialo's Barbera, one of his Barberas, Cipressi, it's called, Cypresses, was the number one wine in Wine Enthusiast's top 100 best buys of 2020. Now, if you think about a wine that costs, I don't know how much it costs in the States, but this is, basically there are 4 tiers of Barbera at Michele Chialo. This is not the absolute entry level, which is a perfectly good everyday wine. This is the second tier. It is not the expensive wines from the best plots. This is a wine they made 30,000 bottles of, and it came out as number one in the Wine Enthusiast top 100 best buys in 2020. So I think Barbera has remarkable quality potential, both at an inexpensive level, and then of course at the super top end, Chialo, Brida, all these guys. They are amazing wines, and Barbera's only problem in life is that there's Nebbiolo in Piemonte as well. If we didn't have Nebbiolo, people would rave about the top Barbera wines. But because we do have Nebbiolo, it gets a bit overlooked. So that's my little plug for Barbera. Let's think about, and then, this is where it gets really exciting. If you like finding something really obscure, here are 3 great grape varieties that make remarkable wines and remarkably different wines. So there's a grape variety called Grignolino, which is pale ruby. If you're interested in chillable reds, lighter chillable reds, which has been the sort of trend, hasn't it, for the last couple of summers, this is Piemonte's answer to light chillable reds. But it does all that with the still typical Piedmontese tannins. Not tannins like in Nebbiolo, but proper tannins. So it's very food versatile. It goes with a wide range of dishes, including some, perhaps not with a steak, but, with anything that's less meaty than a full-on steak. Grignolino would make a great bottle. But equally, you can just sip it, chill. You can chill it, as I've already said. I think it's really beautiful wine. Pretty niche, but, it's good wine to find.
Also something I saw in Santa Fe, but not since. So yeah,
there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
So my second option, I always show these two together, like I did do when I went to Dallas, sort of Texom. So I always do Grignolino and Ruquet together because they could not be more different from each other. So Ruquet is a wonderful recovery story as well. So there was a priest called Don Giacomo Cauda who was moved, I think he originally came from the Roero area, but he was posted into Monferrato, which is central Piemonte. And as part of his stipend, he was given this vineyard of grapes, which would have been totally foreign to him. But he being a good man and needing some wine, he looked after these grapes and made wine from them. And he left us this wonderful quote where he said, "God forgive me for having sometimes neglected my ministry to devote my energies to the vineyard. After celebrating the Mass, I used to change my clothes quickly and climb onto the tractor. But I know that God has forgiven me because with the money earned from the wine, I created the oratory and renovated the rectory." So he has this wonderful self-justification for spending lots of time in his vineyard. So basically, Don Giacomo Cauda kept Ruquet alive as a grape variety. And then later generations came along and a producer called Luca Ferraris took over that vineyard and made wine from this grape variety. And I like to call this red wine on steroids because it is just huge in every dimension. It's intensely aromatic. It's like, rose petal, red fruit. There's all this stuff coming out of the glass at you. High in alcohol, high in tannins, full-bodied. It can often be 15% alcohol, so this is not your light chillable red. But every time I have shown it to people, they have really been impressed by this wine. And there are 2 famous brands, both of which are available in the US, because I had a quick look. Luca Ferraris, as I mentioned earlier, imported by Skurnik. I know these are mostly coastal, but they'll be somewhere in the States. Yeah. And Montalbera from Soil Air. Somebody is taking a punt on a really, really distinct. If you think about a Shiraz, a Barossa Shiraz with Italian tannins, that'll give you an idea of what Ruquet is like.
I was actually kind of thinking northern Rhone in my head. So yeah, but maybe that's just not as big. You need it just to be bigger.
Yeah, it needs to be bigger. It needs to be. Yeah, it could be like some traditional Californian cabs, for example, in terms of weight and all that. Yeah, but with Italian acidity and tannin to go with it. But hugely aromatic. That's it. That's the really unusual thing. Piemonte has a whole range of aromatic red grape varieties. Obviously Nebbiolo is the most famous, but it is not by no means the only one. And then my last one, which I won't talk a lot about because it's obscure and difficult, is Freisa, Freisa, which is a first generation relative of Nebbiolo. And surprise, surprise, is tannic. And I think Freisa, in the past, it used to be, this is just a nice window into the history of Piedmontese wine. So many of these grape varieties that we drink today are still wines, used to be drunk as frizzante wines, so lightly sparkling in the past. And that's a very good way of dealing with Freisa, because Freisa is tannic and quite demanding. But if you stop the ferment and have some bubbles and perhaps a few grams of sugar, it would be very easy to drink. And pleasurable to drink with the quite some fatty foods in Piemonte. The best ones I've had are the aged ones. Occasionally, I've drunk Freisa when it's like 10 years old. The problem is that nobody cares about it enough to really age it like they would. Nobody really thinks about, I'll buy a current release of Barolo and I'm going to drink it tomorrow. I know people have begun to do that, and there are good reasons for doing that now because the wines are now being made for that. But in the past, nobody did that. And in the same way, nobody ages Freisa. But if you really want to understand the quality of Freisa, you do need to keep it for 10 years, which I know nobody does. But that's fine.
Well, in the restaurant industry, we call it wine infanticide. But,
yeah,
it is kind of the economics of how the world has gone.
Yeah, totally.
We don't hold on to wine. No. I think it was, I forget which master somm said it, but I always would laugh about it. It's whenever anyone asked him whether or not a wine would age, he's like, from the point you buy it to tonight for dinner, it's going to be fine. Because he's like 99% of wine purchases drunk within a week.
Yes.
So,
but
for some reason, people still ask that question. They want to know.
Yep. Yeah. No, absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. So the overall message basically is that if you love Barolo and Barbaresco, go on loving it because it is amazing, and I'm very happy to talk about why it's so amazing now. But there is so much more to discover which people just don't know about, and which even really well educated wine people who spend a lot of time, won't have dived into in any great depth. The world of wine is impossibly long and complex, so there's no shame in not knowing about these things. But there is a world of wine. I sort of describe Piemonte as a continent of wine in its own right, or a country of wine in its own right, because it has so many great varieties.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and I think part of this is pretty just straightforward. And in the book, you describe it as like it's part of Western Europe, so of course the history is complex. Yeah. But Piemonte is just due to the fact of where it is. It kind of reminds me of also like Alsace. Like you get these regions that are in between major powers or on trade routes, and of course it didn't develop in a singular way because you have so many people going through, or so many people want to conquer this back through time that you get these grapes and movements, and you get all these different influences. So of course it's going to have this complex, fractured history.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. If you go to Turin, the capital of Piemonte, it looks like Paris, and that's because Napoleon turned it into a mini Paris in northwest Italy. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yep. Yeah.
I was also surprised. I did not realize a couple things. Like I knew about the white truffles, the hazelnut. I'm sure I knew at some point in the back of my head. But like Ferrero Rocher for the chocolate lovers out there, I did not realize that they were at least founded there. Like that was a really fun thing.
Totally. Yeah. If you go to Alba, which is the main wine town of Piemonte, between Barolo and Barbaresco, what do you smell? You don't smell either truffles or Nebbiolo. You smell chocolate and hazelnut, because the major Ferrero Rocher factory, Nutella factory. So Nutella started in Alba. So Nutella basically was a response post Second World War to the fact that there was very little chocolate, was very expensive and rare, and therefore you couldn't make a spread just out of chocolate. You'd use a local product, hazelnuts. in order to extend your chocolate, in order to create more volume. That's what Nutella is. Nutella basically is chocolate and hazelnuts, and no doubt inexpensive fats these days, but that's another story. But it does mean that Alba is a town dominated by Ferrero Rocher, by the Ferrero family, and actually it has made a really important contribution to Barolo and Barbaresco, believe it or not. Why is that? Because post-Second World War, so we're talking about the 1950s, and it's difficult to imagine now because now Barolo and Barbaresco are so wealthy and there is a Michelin-starred restaurant around every corner, it feels. It was actually in serious poverty post-Second World War. And the best way of earning a living was to leave the countryside and to go and work for the Fiat car factory in Turin, or go up and work on the typewriter factory in northern Piedmont. In other words, go to a town, a city with a factory, and that was so much more reliable than you got paid every week, and you earned a stable income, and therefore people fled the land. So what did Ferrero do? They realized that they were going to struggle with workers because Alba is not a major city and there's no Fiat factory in Alba, so they were going to lose people going to Turin instead. So what they did was they organized buses so that every day the workers could come from their Barolo village or their Barbaresco village, be transported to work, taken home in the evening, and then they could go and work on their vineyard. So fundamentally, it meant that the vineyards were kept alive during that period of real poverty because people could work locally and have transport, because nobody had a car in those days. And therefore, they weirdly, Nutella, Ferrero Rocher, and the Ferrero family made a very significant contribution to the success of Barolo and Barbaresco. People held on to their land, and now it turns out it's worth millions of euros per hectare, 60 years later.
Good job, yes.
So it was a good job.
That is
so it's a really interesting bit of symbiosis in a region. Yeah.
Besides, say, like some sections of Napa, Sonoma, maybe some places in Oregon, Washington, like, can you think of a region that has had its fortunes turned around so intensely and so quickly in the world of wine? It seems to be pretty unique in that aspect.
I would need to think about that, but I think you're basically right. I think, I can underpin that with a very classic tale. If you talk to a really old grower, and I'm talking about somebody in their 80s, let's say, in Barolo village or in Barbaresco, they will tell you that in their lifetime, people would come and buy Dolcetto, which was the grape of ordinary people. And if you bought a case of Dolcetto, they would give you a bottle of Barolo because there was no market for Barolo. Okay. And even by 1990, a couple of English wine writers and merchants wrote a very famous book called Tar and Roses, which was about Barolo and Barbaresco. It's the first major book in English about the subject. And they constantly complain in their book that there is just too much Barolo being produced and there isn't a market for it. So that's 1990. Okay? So you're absolutely right. It has come from being this weird Italian speciality, which, locals treasured, but nobody really drank, to being, one of the great wines of the world. Yep, absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. They always believed in themselves. They always knew they're the king of wines and wine of kings, but
Yeah,
it does remind me in a very odd way of Scotch. I heard one person talk about it this way, like Scotch used to be this weird backwaters thing where, like if you loved it, you loved it. But there's also like, it just was a little bit too much for the general public. It was kind of this oddity in the history of whiskey, and it didn't really start taking off until they started releasing mass-produced blended scotches. And it just tamed it down enough for people to get the taste.
Yeah.
And then the interest came back where it's like,
Yeah.
I've gotten hooked on this flavor. I want more. And now you have all these things. Because it's, I mean, like it or hate it, Barolo is very similar. Like, if you're sensitive to acid or tannin, you're not going to have a good time. And I think a lot of drinkers are until they become mature. And so, like, it's definitely not the, like, introductory wine. It's where you go to find out if you're really in love with wine. You know, like, are you ready to take this seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been one of the nice developments. I mean, both Barolo and Barbaresco have become more drinkable. But also the category of Langhe Nebbiolo, which is like a sort of second wine for Barolo and Barbaresco, has really grown in the last 20 years. And that's if you want to introduce Nebbiolo to people, that's the place to start, because it's less extraction of tannin. It's made to be drunk young. And you get all the aromatic complexity of Nebbiolo, but without that massive structure. So that's the place to start. Yep.
And usually, unless you're in a more high-end spot, that's what I've seen more and more by like the glass and by the glass programs. You know, it's usually priced to be in that. Exactly.
Yes. Yep.
I do think, you know, it makes sense for someone who's interested in things besides Barbera, Barbaresco, Nebbiolo, and for someone who wrote the book about all of it. I think it is kind of worth nodding the hat of like, without the champions of Barolo and Barbaresco, like the world almost would have probably overlooked Piemonte in a lot of ways. So it did, and you know, a rising ship helps all the boats, and even when you were talking about the rare grapes, a lot of the producers in Barolo and Barbaresco are also the champions of those indigenous grapes where they can, when they can.
Totally, yeah. And then there's our other disconnect, which is that nobody thinks of Moscato d'Asti as a Piedmontese wine.
I had two things I wanted to ask you about still, the sparkling and also wine law. Like both very hairy subjects, but yeah.
So Moscato is still the most grown grape variety in Piemonte. It's still number one. Number two. It is about to overtake Barbera, because Barbera is dropping because there just isn't the market for the really cheap stuff that workers used to drink in the fields. Okay, so that's been going down. There's still loads of it. We're getting
our calories these days. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, so still it is, but literally either this year or next year, if these trends continue, Moscato will actually overtake Barbera as the most grown grape variety. So when I teach students, I always say to them, "What do you think is the most grown grape variety in Piemonte?" And they all say, "Oh, Nebbiolo." Well, actually, until recently, it was fifth. And it's only until recently it's gone up to fourth now because of it's overtaken Dolcetto. Moscato is really important, but I say it doesn't. Nobody drinks Moscato d'Asti and thinks, right, I must go and find another wine from this region. It's a weird disconnect. It's though it's in a different category altogether.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you need something to pay the bills too, and I'm sure it helps pay a lot of bills. It's we got to buy the glass still. Yeah,
it's beautiful. I love it.
It is funny that, you know, one region has such a serious, like, for the wine lover, the aficionado, only the serious, and then kind of the gateway wine. You know, like how do we get people into drinking wine? Give them a taste of this. Let's see if they like this.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
We can't go without talking a little bit about the wine law of Italy.
Yes.
Just a little nod. And I wanted to, what was it? You called the chapter "Reading the Label: The Joy of Italian Wine Law," which a little tongue in cheek, but
it was quite funny.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, you go, please.
No, it was quite funny because one of the very serious reviewers of wine books in the UK didn't spot that was a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Does
it ever get easier? Like the weird spaghetti lines, the weird, like, or is it just always going to be the way it is?
They have begun to... The problem is, the fundamental problem Well, there are several problems. One is EU wine law is itself very complicated, and that's because it wants to make sure that if it says Cornas on the label, the wine actually comes from that place and that place only. Okay, so it has unlike American AVAs. The wine has to come. Sorry, obviously AVAs have to come from the same place, but they don't have to be made in a particular style. They don't have to have the same grape variety in them. There are all sorts of other laws that come with EU denomination appellations that don't apply in the rest of the world. So that's one complication. The other one is just in Italy, there's this thing called campanalismo, which is basically
can't get too far from the bell. Yeah.
My village is the best place on earth, irrespective of anything else, and I may have never ever been anywhere else, but it's still always the best place on earth, and therefore the wine that comes from my village is the best wine in the world, and therefore when there is an opportunity, I'm going to create an appellation, a denomination for my village. And that's literally what happened in northern Piemonte, where there are 10 denominations for an area of land that is 1/4 of the size of Barolo. Just think about it. 10 denominations for an area of land which is 1/4 of the size of Barolo, which is not a big place.
You mentioned there are different appellations that they release. I think it was like 1 hectare a year. There even those paragraphs in your book where it's just like, this is truly as niche as niche gets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are they doing anything about it? Yes, they are just beginning to think about this problem and about the simplification which they desperately need. So there's a promotional body called Piemonte Land of Wine, and the new presidents of that, the president and vice president, have introduced a very interesting law whereby any bottle from Piemonte can have the word Piemonte under the denomination name. So however obscure, so let's say it's Fara DOC, 5 hectares, total vineyard, you can now write Fara DOC Piemonte under it. So I thought, hooray, somebody has finally got the message that nobody, not even quite a lot of people in northern Piemonte know where Fara is. Never mind anybody in Turin, the capital of Piemonte. Never mind anybody in Rome. Never mind anybody in Omaha, Nebraska is going to know where Fara is. So they are just beginning to think about some simplification in a good way. Yeah.
Conjunctive labeling is, I think, one of the things, even if it was contentious, that Napa got really right, that I think other regions should, because like it or hate it, Napa has a brand, and the more they insisted on the conjunctive labeling, like with Piemonte, the more the brand stuck, and now people know it. And like, if you don't have a brand, if you have this little 5 hectare appellation, then that means nothing to the consumer. And even the most, like, what's the information you have about the bottle? The name of the bottle, the picture on it, and the price. Yeah. And you don't want to get to a place where the only competition you have is price of bottle, because that's never going to work out for a whole region.
No, exactly. Yep. Good. Can I talk a little bit just about northern Piemonte as a sort of subset?
Absolutely, yeah.
So northern Piemonte is very interesting because historically it was much more important than Barolo and Barbaresco. So in the 19th century, this was the wine growing area of Piemonte, and it was the Nebbiolo area of Piemonte. So Barolo and Barbaresco, a little bit like Amarone, are actually modern Brunello are modern inventions, very successful, very important modern wine styles. But historically, northern Piemonte was more important. Why was that? You've already mentioned one of the reasons. One of the reasons is that it is on direct trade routes into Switzerland and France. And it's very close to the major cities of Turin and Milan. So it had a very local market in the way that Barolo and Barbaresco doesn't have a local market in the same way. Obviously today that's all changed because of modern transportation, but in the past, actually being close to your market was really, really important. and it's a great area for two grape varieties, in particular Nebbiolo and Erbaluce. We've talked about Erbaluce already. The Nebbioli from this area are subtly different from Barolo and Barbaresco in that they are lower alcohol, so they're typically 13.5% alcohol rather than 14.5%, and that's because it's cooler. It's cooler because the grape growing areas are literally under the Alps, under the foothills of the Alps. So you get cold air coming down at night, and therefore typically the average growing season temperature, if we want to get technical, is a couple of degrees Fahrenheit lower than in Barolo and Barbaresco, and therefore you get longer, cooler aging period, and so you get beautifully aromatic grape varieties at lower alcohols. The other really intriguing thing about it is that the local tradition was to blend Nebbiolo with other grape varieties. So blend with Vesperlina, blend with Croatina, grape varieties which are really rare, but actually make for subtly different wines. So they have a different tradition up there. But I've been working with an importer in England who is really keen who really believes in the future of Northern Piemonte, partly for the Erbaluce, but mostly for these more elegant, lighter styles of Nebbiolo, and particularly if the climate's going to continue to get warmer, has got real importance for it. So I've just published a 100-page report on Northern Piemonte. It's probably the most comprehensive report that's ever been written about this area. It's a free download, that's the good news, on my website, which is www.winefriend.org. All you have to do is sign up for it, and you can download it directly from my website. And it goes into the history and grape growing traditions and the styles, and it reviews the wines of 90 producers, which I spent the last 6 months visiting and tasting in various places and writing about. So it's really nice. The book, as I say, is about Piemonte as a whole. So if you're interested in Piemonte as a whole, the place to go to is undoubtedly the book. If you want to know a bit more, or if you also want to know a bit more about Northern Piemonte, there's a free resource for you there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'll throw in there too we were talking about value earlier, and it's a great place to find some value. If you love Barolo, but your checkbook's looking a little low, you can find some great deals and some really fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening, I will have links to where you can go to get the 100-page guide, where you can go to get the Wines of Piemonte, and of course a link to your website, which is where you get the guide. So
yes, it's the same thing.
Yes. Before we do say au revoir, because there's just so much we could keep talking probably all day. Are there any words of wisdom or anything you want to leave the listeners of the show with?
Yeah. If you're thinking about a holiday in Europe, do consider going to Piemonte, because it is the most amazing both wine and gastronomic experience. It has one of the... I'm going to be really controversial. It has the most refined gastronomy of Italy. If you think about that for a minute.
You say extremely high, even by a country with very high standards. Yes. Yeah.
So there are the most amazing restaurants, local dishes, etc., etc. It's not a classic tourist place. So if you want to go somewhere that has great wine and, you want to do all the tourist stuff, Tuscany has more to offer. Okay. If you want food and wine and a bit of culture, Piemonte is amazing. And then my second word would be, of course, go to Barolo or Barbaresco, obviously, but go to one other area as well. Just go to Central Piemonte for the great Barbera, go to the Colli Tortonesi for Timorasso, go to one other place. Because, as I've said multiple times, there is so much to discover, so much fun to have. And it's much cheaper, of course, than Barolo and Barbaresco, which have become, by European standards, relatively expensive places. Because of all the investment, the interest, and all that. Yeah. So, it's a great place to visit.
I'll echo that because, I haven't been to Italy, but because I do live in America, I've of course had to make the trek to Sonoma, Napa. And, that was fine. I had a great time there. It's beautiful there. I also went to Lodi. And a little bit more inland, a little bit more less well known, a little more backwater, a little more like growers around. And I had fun. The food was fantastic. The welcome you get at the wineries is like nothing you get in Napa, Sonoma. It's just, it was like night and day. And both were great. Yeah. But I think about Lodi more than I think about Napa.
That's really fascinating. Totally agree. Yeah.
So, super awesome. Yeah. Those of you listening, go out and buy this book. It is dense, but if you want to know about the Piemonte, you work in a place that sells Piemonte wine, it's the guide. So you just got to go for it. And David, thanks for taking some time coming to talk to us about wine and all sorts of things. And hope we didn't touch on Nebbiolo too much.
You know me, I could talk about Nebbiolo forever. There's no problem at all. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. It was a great conversation. And thanks for asking me. Yeah.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening. And stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.